Thousands rallied in the Uruguayan capital to protest against rape culture and violence against women. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called for relations based on mutual respect and warned that NATO is seeking to drag Ukraine into a conflict. Sudanese anti-coup protesters returned to the streets on Sunday, where they were again met with tear gas by security forces. From the headquarters of Teleso English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Uruguay, where thousands gathered in the capital Montevideo to protest against rape culture and violence against women. The mobilizations came after public outrage regarding a gang rape. Protesters marched through the capital's main square, calling for an end to sexual harassment and gender violence and for better sex education and concrete measures to protect women. Protesters demanded that rape, femicide, transphobia and racism be considered a national emergency. They also questioned remarks made by Uruguayan President Luis Lacalle following the recent case that shocked the nation. The protesters argued that his remarks indicated a denial of the reality and hid a very serious problem in Uruguayan society.
For justice is needed. Justice has to be improved. The justice system has to be improved. Those who commit violence should not go free. The justice system keeps them free while they look for evidence. But meanwhile, the aggressors keep doing their business. And the victim is in the house in terrible fear. Her life has changed in 1,000 ways and maybe she can't even leave the house.
Displacement, threats and stigmatization are the consequences of the armed conflict that residents of the Colombian department of Arauca are living. In response, social movements and human rights defenders mobilized in the capital, Bogota, where they launched an SOS given the serious humanitarian situation. Our correspondent Hernan Tobar has the story.
Members of social and human rights organizations arrived in the capital of Colombia to denounce the serious humanitarian situation that the department of Arauca is experiencing. In the first month of the year alone, around 30 people have been murdered, and the conflict has increased in this border zone with Venezuela due to the presence of armed groups. Unleashing aggression against the civilian population that with absurd and delirious arguments have caused the murders of civilians, attacks, kidnappings, displacements, confinement of entire communities, as well as the intensification of threats, accusations and forced recruitment of underage children. The situation was aggravated by a recent bomb attack on a building where social and human rights organizations operate in Saravina, Arauca, which left one person dead, several people injured, and material losses. These organizations stress that these and other violent situations are the result of governmental disregard, non-compliance with the peace agreements, the lack of social investment policies, and farmers' refusal to resume the planting of illicit crops. In the department of Arauca, more than 10 years ago, small-scale farmers decided to eradicate illicit crops. We decided to plant wheat in order to commit to a better life, and in that way, we have also been fighting because as social movements, we have also opposed the replanting of illicit crops, precisely because of the social decomposition that it brings, and the deepening of the humanitarian crisis and the war that it brings to the territory. The government's response to this situation, they say, is far from the necessary comprehensive institutional aid. Instead, it has opted to increase its manpower, which only fuels the war that is being waged internally in both urban and rural areas of the department.
The high level of militarization in the department of Arauca, which today is advancing even further, allows us to clearly understand that this is not the way forward and that it has deepened the conflict even more. The national government does not seek alternatives for dialogue, but on the contrary increases its manpower and does not leave the doors open to continue with the processes of dialogue with the armed actors, as has happened in recent times with the ELN after the FARC signed a peace agreement which is not being complied with.
The residents of Arauca department assure that there are a series of interests of foreign powers in this territory with the purpose to having an excuse to interfere against neighboring nations and intervene militarily, which increases the rate of conflict. For these reasons, they call on national and international social and human rights organizations to undertake a tour to assess the humanitarian crisis and to adopt solutions to achieve peace and progress in their territories.
Mexico's Attorney General's office arrested one of the alleged perpetrators of what is known as the Fast and Furious operation, which in 2009 allowed guns to be illegally trafficked into Mexico from the United States. Our correspondent Eduardo Martinez has the story.
Arrested after running over and killing a woman in Mexico City, Facundo Rosas, former federal police commissioner, was transferred by members of the Mexican Navy to a federal prison in Hermosillo, Sonora, at the request of the Attorney General's Office of the Republic. The arrest warrant is related to his alleged responsibility and participation in the Fast and Furious operation in 2009, during the Felipe Calderón administration, allowed the entry of 2,500 weapons to Mexican territory from the United States. It was intended to be a covert police intelligence operation to track and understand the rationale behind the trafficking of arms across the U.S.-Mexico border, and how these weapons ultimately found their way into the hands of organized crime. Rosas belonged to the closest circle of Genaro Garcia Luna, who was Secretary of Public Security and responsible for Calderón's strategy to fight drug trafficking. Garcia Luna is in prison and on trial in New York for his alleged link to the Sinaloa cartel. The enormous profits produced by the illicit arms trade fuel the possibility that Mexican criminal organizations can source these weapons in the United States market and smuggle them into Mexico on an almost daily basis. There is a structural situation that is linked to geopolitics and the way in which the war on drugs has been waged in the hemisphere for the past 40 years. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador referred to the former police commissioner's arrest. Instead of being something beneficial, it became a tragedy, because they used those weapons to murder people in Mexico and also to murder foreigners. The investigation remains open and presumably this individual participated in that group. Since the beginning of the López Obrador administration, Mexico has demanded its northern neighbor to stop illegal arms trafficking. We naturally believe that the availability of illegal weapons to organized crime is one of the factors that fuels the violence that unfortunately hurts Mexican society and that we no longer want to experience. 11 U.S. companies are being sued for the sale, manufacture and distribution of these weapons, which fuel the smuggling associated with the violence and drug trafficking affecting the country, which in 2021 left a toll of almost 30,000 deaths.
Eduardo Martínez, Telesur, Ciudad de México.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. With tensions rising between the United States and Russia over Ukraine, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Sunday that his country wants relations based on mutual respect and one that NATO is seeking to drag Ukraine into a conflict.
We want good, mutually respectful and equal relations with the United States, as well as with any other country in the world. Each time it turns out that their defense line continues to move eastward. Now it has come close to Ukraine. They also want to drag this country there, although it's clear to everyone that Ukraine is not ready and will not make any contribution to strengthening NATO's security.
Voters are turning out to the polls in Portugal this Sunday in a snap election where no party is expected to secure a majority in Parliament. Socialist Prime Minister Antonio Costa is fighting for his political life after a late surge by the centre-right opposition Social Democratic Party threatened his once comfortable poll lead. The two parties are in a statistical tie according to final polls. With 1 in 10 voters still undecided, analysts said the outcome of the election in a nation of around 10 million people is wide open, with the far right hoping to make gains. The prospect of another weak minority government comes as Portugal is trying to boost its tourism-dependent economy, which has been badly hit by the coronavirus pandemic.
As a young person, I think I could give much more to my country. Many of my friends had to leave Portugal to find work. I had to leave the country myself. I want a better economy and a place where my friends and I can live.
With the inauguration of the new president of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, the victims of the 2009 coup and their families are hoping for long-awaited justice. Our special correspondent, Roberto Hugo Presa, brings us the story.
In her inauguration speech, Xiomara Castro pledged to promote condemnation of the coup d'etat suffered by her husband on June 28, 2009. The repression by military forces left dozens of Hondurans dead, wounded and disappeared.
Regarding direct victims in 2009, in the first 4 months we recorded 117 fatalities. Then, when the illegal re-election and electoral fraud occurred, 37 people were killed.
The military revolt also harmed the civilian population and the organized sectors that supported Manuel Zelaya. This union leader was the victim of persecution and was fired by the coup government. Well, jobs are lost because the workers affiliated to the unions joined the struggle to bring to light the crimes of the coup d'etat. Press freedom was also a victim of the repression. At the time, Hector Amador was director of the state channel, and when he arrived he found the station militarized. Our colleagues were taken out at gunpoint from the TV station and I was not allowed to enter the facility. The presidential palace was occupied and at that time there were already protests by the people mobilized in the street. Media that did not support the coup were also persecuted and shut down. Manuel Alvarado, operator of Radio Globo, recalls how he had to escape through the windows after the station was seized by the military in order to avoid being captured. What we did is that we opened the microphones. We jumped down the back of the building where there is a vacant lot and there's a workshop, and we jumped down a staircase with some ropes. I remember that David fell, he got hurt. Ronnie also jumped from there, and I jumped down last. Former Honduran President Porfirio Lobo, who replaced the coup leader Roberto Micheletti, was a key player in the return of former President Manuel Zelaya to the country. He recalls how, together with Comandante Hugo Chavez, he coordinated Zelaya's return. Well, we met in Cartagena de Indias. President Zelaya could not attend that meeting, but he communicated and said he agreed with what was going to be done. President Chavez was well informed. If I remember correctly, he was accompanied by today's President Maduro, who was Foreign Minister at the time. And with me was Foreign Minister Arturo Corrales, so we discussed and we signed the famous Cartagena Agreement, which was not an agreement of impunity, far from it, as some sectors have claimed. It was an agreement so that the President could have the legitimate right he had as an Honduran to be here in Honduras, as well as his political rights, and that any situation that occurred with him or his government collaborators will be in accordance with the Constitution and the law. With the arrival to power of Xiomara Castro, the victims and their families whose rights were violated during the coup d'etat are confident in justice being done.
The Argentine government announced a new debt repayment deal with the International Monetary Fund for the record debt acquired by the previous administration of Mauricio Macri. From Buenos Aires, our correspondent Carolina Silvestri has the details.
President Alberto Fernandez announced the results of the negotiations between Argentina and the International Monetary Fund over the $44 billion debt acquired by the Macri administration.
Governing is an exercise of responsibility. We had a problem and now we have a solution. We had a rope around our necks, a sword of Damocles, and now we have a path we can follow. Without an agreement, we did not have a defined horizon. With this agreement, we can organize the present to build a future. In comparison with other previous agreements signed by Argentina, it is good to remember that this agreement does not contemplate restrictions that delay our development.
The key to reaching the agreement with the credit agency was the commitment of the Fernandez administration to gradually lower the fiscal deficit.
It does not restrict, does not limit, does not condition the rights of our retirees that we regained in 2020. It does not force us into a labor reform. It promotes our investment in public works. It does not impose reaching a zero deficit, does not impact on public services, does not relegate our social spending, and respects our plans for investment in science and technology. Furthermore, we will be able to access new financing, precisely because this agreement is in place.
On the other hand, Minister of Economy Martín Guzmán confirmed that the agreement will be sent to the National Congress for its analysis.
We were able to reach an understanding on the macroeconomic framework and key policies for a new program with the International Monetary Fund. This general framework has two blocks. On the one hand, the macroeconomic policy outline. On the other hand, the so-called measures that promote medium-term growth and lasting stability.
According to the minister, the understanding reached with the International Monetary Fund also mitigates the situation negatively impacting on the markets, with sharp rises in the value of the dollar and a fall in government bonds.
The central bank will no longer systematically finance the treasury, but in a more normalized economy, the money supply can move in a way that is consistent with the evolution of demand for our currency, without putting additional pressure on exchange rates and therefore on inflation. There is a set of policies aimed at promoting the development of the sectors that have the capacity to generate hard currency in our economy, understanding that the productive bloc is fundamental when it comes to tackling inflation.
The agreement also contemplates the deferral of debt payments due after January and February of this year, which Argentina was not in a position to comply with.
Carolina Silvestre, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Sudanese anti-coup protesters returned to the streets on Sunday, where they were met again by tear gas thrown by security forces. In the capital, Khartoum, thousands continued their protests for civilian rule and against last year's military takeover. Pro-democracy activists have upped calls for mobilizations demanding a restoration of the transition to civilian rule following an October 25th military coup led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. At least 78 people have been reported killed and hundreds wounded in the crackdown on protesters since October, according to an independent group of medics, while authorities have also rounded up hundreds of pro-democracy activists. A delegation from the Economic Community of West African States arrived in Burkina Faso on Saturday, a day after the bloc suspended the country over this week's coup. A security source said the delegation was holding a closed-door working session and that no statement was planned. The delegation is composed of representatives from Benin, Togo and Ghana. Ministerial-level ECOWAS envoys are expected to arrive in the Burkina Faso capital on Monday. On Friday, the West African bloc suspended Burkina Faso, demanding the release of President Roch Marc Christian Kabore, who is being held under house arrest by the army, as well as other detained officials. The once 15-nation bloc suspended two other members last year, Guinea and Mali, after military coups.
ECOWAS is not welcome here in Burkina because there have been situations where ECOWAS could have intervened, for example in terms of security. For years we have suffered from this insecurity, but ECOWAS has not intervened. Now, if the military can help us to regain this security, I think we will go with the military and support them.
If they are not legitimate to organize an army capable of defending the interests of ECOWAS states, they are not welcome in Burkina Faso. You see that ECOWAS is vast. It could have had a strong army to eradicate this terrorism. This terrorism was not even supposed to arrive in Burkina. As soon as it started in Mali, we could have eradicated it even before it got here. ECOWAS is not legitimate to intervene in Burkina Faso, quite simply because the people of Burkina Faso no longer agree with the various decisions taken by ECOWAS on Mali. We have seen the failure of ECOWAS in Mali.
More than 20 Congolese soldiers were killed in an attack by the M23 rebel group on an army position in the Democratic Republic of Congo's conflict-plagued east. Clashes with the Congolese army have caused more than 8,000 families to flee their homes, including residents of 6 villages that have fallen under the control of the rebels. The M23 is one of more than 120 armed groups from which roam eastern DR Congo, a legacy of regional wars more than 2 decades ago. Since November, the group has been accused of numerous attacks on army positions.
We were in our fields in Rugari when we heard heavy and light gunfire. The rebels were on a hill and the soldiers below on a plain. As a result, we decided to flee with our children, and we ended up here in Kibumba with nothing of value taken in our escape. We have been spending the night under the stars for 3 days. We are dying of hunger and we even lack water to drink. Personally, I have been wearing the same clothes for 3 days. That's how I fled. It was the same for my children. We fled in panic. There was no way to take some valuable goods. We don't even have a mattress or a mat to sleep on peacefully.
In Ecuador, a clean-up operation was ordered after an oil spill in the Amazon, which is threatening to contaminate a local river. The spill followed a rupture in a privately owned heavy crude pipeline. The Ministry of Environment warned the oil could reach the Coca River as the government ordered a major clean-up. Through a statement, the OCP Ecuador company said it had activated its emergency protocol and would evaluate the magnitude of the damage to the infrastructure as well as starting the corresponding repairs. The rupture in the northeast of the country was reported to have been caused by a rock slide triggered by heavy rains. And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For Telesu English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.